big sword, a claymore.
Two-handed sword.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Huge, and handles on them about a foot and a half long, a
Yeah.
foot long.
So you could get both hands on
Both hands, and that way they could cleave these leather,
Vikings.
yeah, they could cleave them right in half. These leather shields that the Vikings had.
Yeah, yeah.
They were made out of bull hide, most of them, but nothing would stand up to them claymores.
Yeah.
Just slice right through it, and just like a
Well, the weight, momentum of that.
Swing that thing, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard that.
Is that going now?
Yeah, I heard the Scots had a few battles going too between them.
Oh, they had lots of battles.
Between the clans.
That's all they ever done seems to be. Fight amongst themselves.
The Highlands against the Lowlands?
Well, yeah, the Highlanders were awful raiders, you know. They'd come sweeping down into the Lowlands and raise cane and slaughter and...
They were almost Vikings.
Well, the same type of people.
Yeah,
yeah. They had to more or less do that to survive, because some of the Highlands is pretty tough country, and there's no way you can live up there. There's nothing to grow, and so they had to steal and plunder, and they'd come down and pack off wine and grain and drive herds of cattle back. The odd woman for sheep, for
a wife,
to
raise kids, more sons,
to
replace the ones that fell in battle.
What did they used to say? They used to steal women and sheep and women, and preferably in that order. Yeah.
I heard the Campbells were terrible. The Campbells were a bunch of outlaws. I don't know.
Well,
I guess it all depended on what the blood feud was.
There was lots of inter-clan wars, you know. But most people, the Campbells, the real thing about the Campbells was this slaughter they made of the MacDonalds in Glencoe. And it seems the MacDonalds had sent a man in to register the clan into submission. This was in the days of the English invasion coming in. And they all had to go and register, and this old MacDonald had gone in to do that. But in the meantime, they'd sent in a bunch of Campbells who were, what do you want to call it? They had thrown in with the English, and so they had sent
traitors,
them in,
kind of traitors.
They'd sent them in there to try and straighten this thing out, you see, and they told them that they were coming and that they were going to surrender, sort of thing, and knuckle down. So they had a big feast and lots of whiskey flowing, and
all night long,
and
got them all tired.
The MacDonalds put them up and treated them royally because they spoke the same language and everything. And in the night time, they got up, the Campbells, and slaughtered all the MacDonalds in their beds. Half of them. The odd one got away, and that's why there's still friction between the Campbells and MacDonalds to this day. Because they never forgive them for that.
The McDonald's don't buy any Campbell soup.
No way.
They won't buy any Campbell soup at all.
Nothing to do with the Campbell. I had some friends over there that were back in Nova Scotia that were buying life insurance off this fella, and he used to stop and have tea with them once in a while. And they never did know his name, so one day he happened to sign a statement or something, and a receipt, and he was a Campbell. Oh, God, they threw him right out the house right there and canceled the insurance policy. You didn't have nothing to do with it.
They closed her all off.
Right there, that's the end of it. And they're still like that, lots of them. It's hard to believe always. And that was in 1600 and something when they had that big slaughter, the Massacre of Glencoe. If you ever see the book, you should read it. That's what it's called.
Yeah. I want to get back sometime and see. I guess I'd be like you, though, trying to track down my relatives, because maybe you could track yours easier. But my grandmother came over, well, she didn't come over. Her parents came over, like in 1860s or 70s or something like that. How do you track down the Craigs?
That would be easy to trace.
Would it?
Yeah. Because In 1855, the government started keeping records of all births, deaths, and everything. If you go before that, that's when you have the trouble. Then you got to go to the church records.
And go through all
And each
marriage.
each parish had their own records. And boy, I'm telling you, that's fierce.
Yeah, you tried it.
I tried it. I got so involved in that and so mixed up, and I found so many laws over there.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't believe it. So finally, I gave up because, like I told the wife, we're just wasting our holiday, chasing around looking for all this stuff. So let's forget about it. They're all dead anyway. So
it's like your sign on the wall. Why worry?
Yeah, well, that's it. Why worry? Because I mean, after all, it's all gone. But we can trace them back for a couple of 100 years on my father's side. And mother's people came out, I don't know, in the late 1700s or early 1800s. They were McNeils from Barra. That was the stronghold of the McNeils in the old country, the Isle of Barra. It's just south of Southeast where old Mackenzie's people had the. And I was over there. I spent 2 or 3 days there and went all over the island.
Mm-hmm. What does it do to you? When I was over there, I felt really strange because I was walking on the land my grandfather had worked as a boy, and I stood in buildings. In Norway, they had a summer farm and a winter farm. The summer farm is where they sent the older boys to watch the cattle up in the highlands.
Up in the hills.
Yeah, up in the highlands. So he would sit up there all by himself, 14, 15-year-old boy, responsible for 44 head of cattle. And that was their life, boy. And there were bears in there. And stuff, and Wolverine, and things like that. He had some deal, some responsibility. But when I walked around there, it really, I don't know, there's some sort of an ancestral feeling there. It really stirred me. It really stirred me.
Well, it gives you a funny feeling because actually what you're doing, you're just walking back through time into history, the history of not only your people, your own people, but of your clan and the nation, the beginnings of Canada, and so on.
Right.
See, the McNeils that came out here in force into Nova Scotia about, I'm guessing, but in the early 1800s. And my grandmother was a McNeil, and her grandfather came out. Now, whether they came out after the clearances in the old country, or whether they came out as immigrants, I don't really know, because it was all happened about the same time. After the Battle of Culloden, when the clan system fell, 1745, when the Battle of Culloden was,
that ended it all.
That ended the clan system. And when
they declare a truce?
Well, they had to. They were forced into it. They were defeated at the Battle of Culloden, and English rule came into effect then, and they claimed they were all Britain. But
that remains to be. According to a Scotlander.
To this day, they never accept that. They still have to live under those rules.
Right.
So, and we were to the battlefield of Culloden, a very sad place to go.
They died by the droves.
Oh, yeah.
Those wars were vicious. They were.
And they just buried them in common graves.
Yeah.
And you can still see the mounds where they covered them over. And they know some of the mounds that this is a McDonald mound and that's a Fraser mound and this is another mound. They just buried them according to their tartans. They didn't know who was which, and they could see if you had a Fraser clan tartan on, they put you in the Fraser grave, or if you were a McDonald or whichever. And
it's so stupid. It was like the Civil War in the States, brother against brother, relative against relative.
Well, this wasn't like that. This was English invasion of the country. Bonnie Prince Charlie was going to back to the same old thing. They were Catholic, and of course the English were Protestant. Yeah. It was a religious war plus a clan war.
Plus all kinds of grudges in between.
A little bit of everything. Yeah, it's too bad, but that's the way it was.
Is there a Mackenzie clan?
Oh, certainly.
So like that Laird there, that old man.
Oh, yeah. He wouldn't belong to the Mackenzie clan. Oh, sure.
I'm not quite sure of one thing there. Was his name Laird Mackenzie?
No. Laird means
Lord?
Well, it's in English you could translate it into Lord, but it doesn't mean that exactly. It means uh, landlord. More. The landlord of such and such an area would be Laird. So when he was up the 1 mile, there was nobody else there, eh? So they called him the Laird Mackenzie.
On that stump range.
That was his area.
That was his stump range.
Yeah, and they called it Mackenzie Lake.
Yeah. Huh.
You know where Broomfield is at the end of the lake there?
Yeah.
Well, that's Derwent Broomfield. Well, his dad, old Ellick, that used to own the Princeton Hotel, he got old Mackenzie his old age pension.
Oh, yeah.
And he never got a pension till he was 70 in those days. And the old boy had a pretty tough struggling, you know,
Yeah.
and getting old. So when he got to be 70, Alec Broomfield got the old boy his pension.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear, it's always hearsay, that's how come he got that piece of land from old Mackenzie.
Oh.
That was all his place, the whole works. Really.
Yeah, all the way around.
And he let him have that, or sold it to him, or give it to him, or something
Yeah.
for favor of getting him the pension.
Well,
that's how it was.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Sure.
$20 a month. That's what he used to get from pension.
I know a guy. Well, one guy said the CPR, Canadian Pacific Railway, used to give him a kick in the seat of the pants.
Oh, sure.
He says they would pay it, but it was just, whether they wanted to give it to you or not.
Yeah.
There was no.
Well, the one thing they used to do, which was pretty tough, the man would put in so many years, and when he got into within a few months of pension time, they'd fire him.
Yeah, so they didn't have to pay
the pension. They
didn't
have to give him the pension. And that was quite a common thing, which is too bad, but that's the way it went. But old Laird Mackenzie was quite an old fellow. He finally died of consumption, or, what do you call
Pneumonia?
it? TB.
Oh.
They said he had TB all his life, and I guess all that goat's milk he drank is what kept him going.
Oh, yeah. Huh.
But he always used to cough and catarrh, he called it, but you could tell it was in his chest, eh? Mm-hmm. He was quite a guy. His old whiskey of his. Well, I used to take him to town, eh? Mm-hmm. In the old Model T, and I'd be going in and we'd get his mail and maybe get a little flask of whiskey if he had enough money.
Scotch, of course.
Oh, yeah. And he always used to put on one of them old-fashioned plaid knit ties, them old-fashioned ties. Mackenzie clad.
Oh, he had his tartan.
Oh, yeah,
tartan
in a necktie.
In a necktie, yeah.
And so this day I came down to get the old boy to go, and no tie. And I thought, oh boy, he's forgot his tie. But I thought, well, I better not say it, and you might hurt his feelings. Anyway, we came out. Before he got in the car, he happened to look up. He said, I think it's going to rain, boy. He said, and he had a bow tie on. Oh, yeah. But it was all covered over with the whiskey. You never, unless he looks up in the air, you never see the tie. Well, so that struck me funny. Somebody gave him a bow tie, and he never wore one in his life. So he thought he'd try it out. But you never knew you had it on.
He must have had an aristocratic old face, snow white beard.
Yeah, snow white hair and white beard. And I used to trim his hair. Trim my locks, he'd say. His hair. It'd be getting scraggly, and I'd go down. And when Alma and I were young, running around together, we used to go up there on a Sunday. And I'd trim the old boy up.
We're talking about Laird Mackenzie.
Oh, Laird Mackenzie.
Yeah. He must have been quite a guy. How long did he live? How old
he lived till 1942. He died. As a matter of fact, he died while we were on our honeymoon. By the time we came back, the old man was gone.
Buried,
We buried him up there, right in front of the ranch. His grave is right out in front of that house that's there now.
Oh.
Yeah.
On the hill there.
Yeah. Where the road goes up to that little house.
Yeah, Broomfield.
Up above. Yeah. Well, that's Mackenzie Creek. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, he's buried right alongside there, practically in the road. The road's putting right over top of the old boy. Yeah.
The old engineers went right over his grave, huh?
No, not that road. The little road up to the house.
Oh.
Not the highway. The little road up to the house.
Is there any kind of a sign there? Nothing.
No, nothing. Yeah. Years ago, he always wanted an iron railing around his grave.
Uh-huh.
And Durwood Bloomfield and I were always going to get together and try and get some pipes and get somebody to weld up
Mm-hmm.
a railing and put around his grave. But then the land changed hands, and
Mm-hmm. Now they're renting that spot.
well, people don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
It's there. Most
Yeah,
people.
yeah. Well, I don't know. What difference does it make, huh?
Not really. And that little across the creek there, where there's another creek comes down the hill from the other side, right opposite Mackenzie's on the west side. And then the spring, there's quite a freshet comes down there.
Where the camp is.
Where that other camp
Tula Head is.
Tula Head.
Yeah, yeah. Huh.
So he used to call that Tullahard, which meant on a high spot,
Yeah.
hard. And he used to call it the Roaring Falls of Tullahard over there. Spring. He used to come down. Well, I used to get hell from him. Because I couldn't talk the language. You see.
Yeah, yeah. With the proper.
He figured I should be able to understand it.
Yeah, with a name like Waugh. Yeah.
But well, yeah. But anyway, I couldn't understand the Gaelic, and he used to give me hell because he said, "You should know it, boy." He said, coming from back east there and everything. Poor old Mac. We used to have lots of fun together.
Was he ever married?
No.
Never was married, huh?
He came
Any
out
close
here.
calls?
I don't think so.
No, never was.
He came out here about the time of the Real Rebellion.
Oh, gee, he did get in here early.
Oh, yeah, he was an old timer.
Yeah.
And he wound up in here. He was going to go to Australia to the gold rush or something, and he wound up in Vancouver, and then he heard about the Blakeburn, or the Granite Creek, and he was going to come up there.
Make his fortune?
Make his fortune. Lots of people were going to do that.
Yeah.
But anyway, he wound up in here around 1900, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Huh.
And
did he just...
He came over the Hope Road with a saddle horse and a pack horse.
Yeah.
Hope Trail, I should say.
Yeah.
And he got into Princeton, and then he used to ride around looking the country over, and he rolled up there and seen the fish in the lake and the creek, and lots of mink and trapping and beaver, and the old boy was quite a trapper in his
Was
day.
he? Oh, yeah. Did he catch the mink that he bred? Like, did he catch those, or did he...
I don't think so. Those were farm-bred,
farm-raised.
Yeah.
But he was...
Oh, yeah, I remember they had a picture of him one time in the Vancouver Sun of the province. It was a cougar that he'd caught, and he was taking it up from down across the creek there where that camp is today. He was taking it up to the house. He was going to put it in the pen. And the way he done it, he had two big long ropes.
Yeah.
And there was lots of stumps in those days, of course. And he'd tie the rope around this stump, and then he'd lead the cougar up, and then when he got there, he'd tie that rope, and then he'd undo this one, and that's how he kept with the two long ropes, and he led him right up to the house, and they had pictures of this in the paper. But I guess the photographer happened to come along when
he was in process.
But he used to do quite a bit of trapping. When I was a kid, I used to poach around. There was no I don't know if anybody had any trap lines there, but we just trapped wherever you could find something to trap.
Yeah.
To try and make a couple of bucks, that was the big deal. Yeah. And anything I'd catch, I'd take down to old Mac, and he'd sell it for me. Mm-hmm. Because fur buyers used to drive through here all the time in the wintertime and picking up furs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the way they did it in those days.
Yeah.
Traveling fur buyers. And you had a dicker.
Oh, yeah, you argue like the devil. One fella come through, and he didn't know very much. I'd caught a bobcat.
Oh.
And took it down to old Mac to sell it. And Mac was laughing like the devil when I came down. He said, "Boy, you sure done good on that bobcat." He said, I got linked prices for you. He said the fur buyer
he didn't know the difference.
Was kind of green, he said. I told him it was a link, and he paid it for a link. With his old bobcat.
Did you ever catch any weasels?
Oh, yeah, lots of weasels.
Vermin,
and mink. Yeah.
I did some trapping, and I remember there were two Jewish fur buyers in this town where I grew up. And I'd go to one and find out what they were worth to him, and then 3 or 4 blocks away the other one lived, so I'd run over there. And they knew what I was doing.
Oh, sure.
They knew this kid that was trying to get the best price on his weasels. Oh, the stuff. I wonder. I guess they never picked it up. One day they used to dock you if the tail fell off when you were pulling.
Yeah.
You'd lose it.
Yeah.
15 cents, and the whole thing was only worth 35 cents. So I took a common pin, like you use for sewing, and I stuck the tail back together and let it dry.
Oh, sure. There's lots of tricks. We used to shoot kites, and you'd get a few dollars for a couple of $3 for a kite. Big bullet hole blasted through the other side of them.
Mm-hmm. Sew it up.
Sew it all up, and camouflage it over, and try and make it look good, and comb all the hair out on the other side so you didn't have it all patched up.
And of course, the skin was inside and the hair was out.
Yeah.
So if they didn't look inside.
Well, they looked inside, but it didn't look so bad if you had it all combed nice, and then there was always hair or blood in the hair, so you comb all the blood out and brush it all out nice.
Yeah. Rub some sawdust in it.
Make it look as good as possible. Well, lots of tricks in the trade, all right. But that's how you had to do to survive, That was the thing. Where were you going to make a couple of dollars out in the bush like that?
Did you know Charlie Smith? Charles E. Smith at all?
Charlie Smith. Sounds like I should know him.
Yeah, he used to say anything to make a nickel. He used to trap muskrats in northern Saskatchewan. Anything to make a nickel, he'd say.
Yeah.
A lot of guys trap. I trapped, I guess I was, almost every kid in our high school class, northern Minnesota, where I grew up, was quite good for a country, too.
Yeah. Oh.
And so we all trapped weasels. And then an occasional mink would wander by.
Yeah, we'd get a few mink, and I trapped a few mink when I was a kid over at Christina Lake there. Yeah. We'd come along the lake shore and up and down the creek, and skunks and mink and the odd muskrat and weasels, of course, they're everywhere.
Yeah, that was our bread and butter. We used to.
Yeah. And there's two sizes of weasels, There's the ordinary little fella, and then once in a while you get the giant weasels. You ever see one of them?
No, all we got were the short
same
tail.
thing.
Yeah, I know.
Same weasel, but really, you go twice as big as an ordinary weasel.
And you got a lot more for them, too.
Oh, yeah.
We lived right on the border. They were called a prairie weasel or something. They were long-tailed weasels. And we lived in the forest area where I grew up.
Oh, yeah.
And so they were the short-tailed weasels in there. Once in a while, a long-tailed weasel would wander through. But then I was trapping mostly, get this, I was trapping mostly within the city limits of Duluth. In the parks, in the public parks.
Oh, yeah.
With rat traps. See this finger?
Yeah.
See that?
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't look right, does it? With rat traps.
One time, old Mac always had trouble getting enough meat for his mink,
Mm-hmm.
So anybody that had any spare meat, if a cow died or anything on the farms, or if I had a little extra deer meat that was starting to get a little bit too old or anything, I'd take it down to Mac and he'd have it for his mink.
Mm-hmm.
And Harrison, one time, they had a bunch of, that's where the dry lake, Round Lake place is now. I don't know who lives there now.
They call it Borgeson one.
Borgeson Lake, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Round
that
Lake,
ranch,
yeah.
That's the Round Lake ranch. Harrison.
Oh, it's Peterson now.
Peterson. Well,
Arvid
Harrison,
Peterson.
an English couple, they owned it then when I was a kid.
Yeah.
They bought off old Ole Bergeson. He's the guy that homesteaded it in the first place, old Ole.
Mm-hmm.
He sold it to them and lived out his days in town there where a very good fellow lives in that house. So,
Oh, yeah. Sure. And Eric bought it from him.
Yeah, well, Eric's dad bought it. And Eric got it from his dad when he died. Anyway, old Harrison had so dang many cats around the barn one time. I guess it was driving him nuts, so he got the gun out and he shot a whole bunch of cats.
Yeah.
Threw them in a sack. This was wintertime.
Yeah.
And for old Mac's mink, he took them down.
Mm-hmm.
And old Mac, having this catarrh, as he called it, he could never smell worth a hoot, So I went down there one time, and it was in the wintertime, colder than the blazes. Man, when I got in the house, what a smell in the house. Oh, you wouldn't believe the smell in that house. Old Mac sitting there, it didn't bother him a bit. I said, Mac, there's got to be something spoiled in here somewhere, Oh, I looked all around the kitchen. I used to look in the roasters. He'd put stuff away and forget. He's getting old. Sometimes I've seen fish he'd have in a roaster, and the fuzz of the hair would come right up with the
Green.
Be that old. But it wasn't anything like that. And I couldn't figure it went all through the kitchen. It seemed to be a little worse in the front room, if possible.
Yeah.
So I came back and I said, what's in that sack, Max, behind the stove? Oh, by golly, says, maybe that's the cats, he says. Maybe that's what it is. These cats were all froze solid when Harrison brought them down. And he'd hung them behind the stove to thaw them out, and they'd been there for a week or 10 days, if you can imagine. Behind the heater, they were just about ready to jump out of the sack, Oh, man, what a smell. I'll never forget that. Oh, yeah, he says, it's the cats, maybe. No maybe about it.
Yeah.
They were just about dripping out the bottom.
Oh, rotting the sack out.
Oh, God. How anybody could live in there, I got them outside finally and aired the house out, and it wasn't too bad once I got them out of there.
Did old Mac have any say special quirks or interests? Like say, often these guys that are you wouldn't call him a hermit, I suppose. Maybe you would, but he liked people, didn't he? He didn't isolate. Yeah. So you wouldn't call him a hermit or a recluse, but he was a loner for sure.
He was a loner. Yeah. There was some people he'd take to, and others he wouldn't tell.
Yeah.
He didn't like.
But did he have any special thing? Like some of those guys would read everything they could about certain subjects. Did he have any special
not that I can think of.
Yeah.
No.
He just loved the woods, the hunting and the
He
fishing.
liked it outside, and he had his goats, and he had a whole bunch of white leghorn chickens.
Oh, yeah.
And he used to sell eggs in town and take them to the store and trade them.
He just made a buck wherever he could.
And then he'd trap a little bit, and when he couldn't trap anymore, then he had these pens
made,
of mink, and then he had 2 pair of foxes he got, and people used to raise foxes from them, them black silver-tipped foxes.
Silver fox. Yeah, right.
And he had 2 of them, 2 cages full. And I went down there one time, and the old man was just fit to be tied. He was just a jumping and a cussing up and down. Finally, I got it out of him. What was the matter? He says, I got the 2 foxes in the one pen and the 2 vixen in the other. There was no pups that year.
His odds were pretty bad.
Oh, boy. Poor old Mac. Yeah, we used to have lots of fun.
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah, the Laird of Tullahard.
You learned a lot from him, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that funny how a young person and an old person will get attached like that? A real old fella and a real young. Yeah.
And we got along just fine. Lots of people didn't like old Mac, because he's hard to get along with, hard to get to know him. But he was real good to me, and I sure liked the old fella. Yeah, there was lots of characters in those days. Old Jack Sin lived up there where Sky Blue is now. See them old log buildings there?
Yeah. Thynne.
Yeah.
Thin. Yeah. Well, how about Thin Lake up there north of Otter Valley?
Yeah, same guy.
Is it the same one?
Him.
Oh, do you know who I was talking to that told me about old Jack Thin? Yeah, Henry Fremd.
Oh, yeah.
Old Henry Fremd, yeah.
Well, he would know. Evidently, he got in trouble with the CPR right away going through his property up there when they put the railroad up there.
Oh, yeah.
And he was going to have, so the story goes, he had a lawsuit with the CPR and lost the whole ranch. That's the place there where Eddie Cook used to be, And that was the old Thin Ranch. And that great big house used to be a stopping house.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Stagecoach overnight and chained horses and stuff.
In that grove of trees, it probably wasn't there then, but there's a grove of trees there now. Yeah.
So then he came over to this side, and old John Burns there that owned where Sky Blue is, that was all John Burns' place. And Thin got in with John Burns somehow, and they looked after old John till he died, and he left him the ranch. That's how they got the ranch in the first place.
And then there's something about Thin Mountain and Thin Lake.
Yeah, well, that's
up there in
Thin Mountain. That's up behind the hill up there
on the Otter Valley.
Yeah. But you see that they all landed there first, the Thinns, and then that's how come Harrison was out here. He was an Englishman too, but he worked for Thin and up there on the ranch in the Otter Valley. So then, by the time the war was over and Harrison came back out again, uh, Thin was over on this side at Sky Blue. So
After his CPR bout.
bounced them out. Yeah. So then Harrison stopped with Thin's up there and was looking for land, and looking for a farm. So then he came down and old Oldie Bergeson was getting pretty old and wanted to sell out. So Harrison bought his place and moved down there. A high trestle, see, would run opposite way. And they used to pump from there up into the trestle, and then the water run back up towards
Up the hill.
top of the field.
Yeah, towards the
And then
houses.
it would back down the other ditches.
Oh, yeah.
So that in the summer, when the water went down in the creek, we still had a system of irrigation.
Huh.
Yeah.
Ingenious. Do you see what the guy's doing on the north end of Mackenzie Lake? Have you noticed?
Mackenzie.
He's ditching back
Yeah.
from the level of the lake. He's ditching back into his field.
Well, that's to drain the fields.
Is it?
That's drains, yeah.
I thought it was to get water out of the lake.
No, it's the opposite way around. That place used to be a kind of a swamp. You couldn't even walk a horse in there. You'd lose them. I've had horses into their belly in there.
Really? Yeah.
Trying to cut hay and stuff in there.
Oh, gee. It's funny how I got that just completely reversed.
No, that was all kind of a big fluey swamp in there, and alder and wild parsnip and good bear feed in there.
The bears that come down
The
there.
bear used to like that wild parsnip.
Yeah.
And you couldn't walk in there. It was so wet till he put them ditches in, and then he get it all drained out, and the land, now they can use the land again. It was real good land, but it was just like black muck, just like a swamp.
Too cold. Too wet and cold.
Wet. Well, you just couldn't get on it to do anything because you'd lose your outfit. No way could you cut the hay or anything.
Do you know what?
I put the hay up on that place in about 39 or so.
Yeah. Lynn Smythe tells me that the fish are running out of the north end of Mackenzie into the creek.
Wait a minute now, the north end of Mackenzie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where that Echo Valley Ranch is there? Echo Valley Ranch? Ferguson, I guess his name is? Or is it Smith now?
Wait a minute, the north end of Mackenzie, yeah, that's Smith.
That's Smith now.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, they're running up that creek now.
Mm-hmm.
And the bears come down off the mountain still.
Yeah.
They go down there and they feed on those fish.
Yeah.
Those spawning trout.
Yeah.
And the crows and ravens are coming down and getting them.
Yeah.
Just like the seagulls get salmon over on the coast.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
But
They know these spots, that's for sure.
It still amazes me how lucky I've been to live in a wilderness area. I really I consider this a wilderness area. I mean, not as wild as when you were a kid, but sure, a lot wilder than other places. And there's still animals coming down, feeding the old way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Well, that'll go on until people push them back too much and shoot them off.
Well, I think if you gave them the place to live, peaceful, they would handle it. Just like Yellowstone, they can handle that pressure of all those people if they get a few places to live and breed.
Oh yeah, they gotta be able to live and breed and so on in peace and harmony with nature, because animals are nature. I mean, it's the same.
Well, yeah, that's why we've been battling in the Fish and Game Club to try to keep the Paradise Valley and the Pasayten area from being logged. What a deal. Every last stick they got to take,
Yeah. Can't leave it.
They can't leave it there to die and decay. It's wasted if it dies and decays,
They're across from Mackenzie place, where the camp is now, on that hill. You ever been back up on that hill?
Where the road is.
Where Mackenzie's place was.
Yeah.
Across the road and back up the hill.
Okay,
on
Tulahead,
on the west side.
I've never been up there, no.
Well, when I was a kid, that had been all burnt.
Oh, yeah.
And that was a fairly fresh fire within 4 or 5 or 8 or 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it had grown up in brush and fireweed and that tall yellow grass that grows after the fire.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, God, you wouldn't breathe the deer that were in there.
Oh,
Just like sheep.
Yeah. Well, somebody was telling me Oh yeah, it was old Olson, Art Olson.
Oh yeah.
He said nothing to go out on Round Lake. He said within a half an hour have your buck.
Yeah.
Just go out and pick what you wanted.
Yeah. I used to hunt for old Mac a lot down there. He was getting old and couldn't hunt. And everybody had to eat deer in them days, or you didn't eat very good. If you didn't have any venison, you didn't have much of anything.
Yeah.
And I'd go over there, and if the deer run up over the top of the hill and went back over the top, I wouldn't bother shooting it because I had to pull it out. I used to wait till I'd get them on the side hill because it was easier to drag them down.
Sled them down.
Yeah. Nothing to it. Go over there and shoot old back of deer, nothing to it. Have it down in the house, butcher it out in an hour or so, hang up and let them go to it.
Now, people must have got tired of venison, eating it.
Well, some can't even look at it to this day, but I still like it.
Yeah, but did they use a lot of ketchup?
No.
How come at Blakeburn
you had to buy ketchup? Where were you going to get ketchup?
Well, yeah, I suppose you didn't. You didn't
got
buy
to think about these things.
Yeah.
And I was 20 miles or nearly 19 miles from town. You think I'm going to pack a bottle of ketchup all the way home on my back?
Never thought of that, no. But up at Blakeburn, there's ketchup bottles by the ton in the dump up there.
Oh, yeah.
But I suppose
they had to store up there. And the miners, they were making wages,
Yeah.
Blakeburn run all during the hard time. Blakeburn was running.
Mm-hmm.
And the miners were making money. $3 and $4 a day, which was a fortune in those days.
Yeah, some places in the country they didn't make that in a week.
I didn't make that in 2 months. Never mind a week.
$4?
$4. Where in the name of heavens would you get a hold of $4?
I don't know.
One time I used to get bounty on coyotes, for $2.
Yeah.
You'd run your tail out for days.
Chasing one coyote.
Trying to get $2. But I got this one guy anyhow. I turned him in and I got the $2.
Mm-hmm.
And I folded it all up in a little square and I used to keep it in my watch pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Because I figured, boy, I got $2. I'll never be broke. I'm rich. I've got $2. And I carried that damn thing around till I wore the paper wore out on it.
Yeah.
I had to take it and change it.
At the bank.
And I bet you I had that thing for 2 years.
Yeah.
That $2 bill. I wouldn't spend it. No, sir.
Yeah.
Because, that was a big deal, $2. Holy smoke. A box of rifle shells only cost you $2.35 in those days.
That's big rifle.
Yeah.
30-30.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a .257 at the time. That's what I had.
That's an interesting gun.
Yeah.
253,000.
Yeah. It was a nice little gun. Good deer gun. It was kind of light for anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not good in brush either.
No.
Bounce those bullets off the twig real easy.
But it was a dandy gun for long range, and it was a dandy for kites.
I'll bet, yeah.
And
it wouldn't blow them up too bad.
No. And you could shoot at long distances.
Yeah. One of those old lever action Savages?
Yeah.
Yeah. They were a beautifully designed gun. Yeah, a friend of mine had one of those. Yeah.
We used to come down here to the range country, where there was more kites, and we'd walk. Mm-hmm. We'd go up here, get somebody to drive us up this road here on the old Sizzler Hill Road. And then we'd walk through and come out up there at Separation Lake and shoot kites,
You'd see them out there hunting mice and stuff in the field?
Yeah, in the wintertime. Yeah. Snow.
And you got them for bounty?
Shoot them for bounty.
Yeah. That's the irony of it all. They hunt mice, but the government figured they were bad for what? The deer or the cattle or what?
Well, both, eh? Coyotes are really bad things. People don't realize it that haven't lived amongst them, but I've seen them eating deer, pull deer down and
eat them alive.
And I've seen them eating calves that are in the process of being born.
Oh, yeah.
They eat them right out of the back of the cow.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I don't have any particular love for coyotes.
Yeah.
And then when you stop and think of all the grouse and rabbits they eat to boot, I think we can do without too many of them. Right?
Yeah.
It's all right to have a few to just keep the species here, but I don't think we should let them ever get very abundant.
I know.
In the years when we had lots of deer around, the coyote kills were all over the place. You'd hear them howling and crying all night. And we used to, I don't know, it seems to me we had deeper snows in those days when I was a kid and tougher winters.
Right.
And the big crust on the snow, and the poor old deer would go through, and they'd be all cut, their legs would be cut right up to their bellies pretty near from going through the frost, the crust.
Mm-hmm.
And the kites would chase them, and they could knock them off just like nothing to get them. One time, where George Smythe has that little store thing up there.
Yeah, right on the highway, yeah.
There's kind of a bare spot on that knoll, that hill facing north. One of the few times that I was walking up the road without a rifle, I always carried the rifle when we were kids. See?
Yeah.
You always carried a gun. You never went anywhere without a gun. That was stupid.
Yeah.
But I didn't have one this time. I'm coming along there, and here's 4 coyotes that got a doe down up there. And I hollered and yelled and screamed and done everything and jumped up near, but they paid no attention. They just eat her up just right now. And she was bawling away, and they were ripping chunks out of her. And they go for the belly first. So you eat the fat. The hot fat on the belly is what they always go for first. And they just rip their guts open, and then they're right in there, you see. Mm. And she's still alive and bawling and yelling, and oh man, what a schmozzle. And I was never so mad, I don't think, at wildlife in my life as I was that time with no gun. If I'd have had a gun, there'd have been
at least one or two.
One or two, anyhow.
Yeah.
And they just got her down there, standing there looking at her. What could I do? I couldn't get off the road. It is steep up there, lots of snow, and it's kind of a rock slide.
I suppose you tried to pitch a rock or two, but
they're too far away for that. Yeah. They were within rifle shot.
Yeah. Ideal for your 250, 3000.
Oh, yeah, I could have picked them off there. Yeah. We done lots of things with deer in those days. You had to, because you didn't have anything else. At least we didn't.
You guys didn't snare them, did you?
Well,
that was a trick of the Finns back there in northern Minnesota. They'd make these spring pole sets, and catch deer. Well, that was their food.
Yeah, right.
What nature provided, they tried to find a way to get.
Well, in those days, there was lots of deer, and money was very, very scarce, and shells were at a premium. So you never took an unusual shot, eh?
You were pretty sure of that shot.
It had to be a dead shot because you could only afford to waste one shell for one deer. You didn't blank like they do today.
Yeah.
You had a dead shot or else you didn't shoot. You sneaked around till you got a perfect shot, and then you let them have it. Mm-hmm. And so that a box of shells lasted you quite a while. And then we always used to try and get a bear for the winter to get the fat. You see, you had bear fat then for the winter to fry in. And good for your boots and
your hair.
Did
you use it on your hair?
Yeah.
Bear fat?
And bear
I was
fat.
just kidding.
No, it's good for your hair,
and
it makes darn good pie crust.
Well, you still got your hair, and I'm losing mine.
Why didn't you have any bear fat?
Yeah.
Mother used to make pie crust out of bear fat. It's delicious. Makes good shortening for.
I've heard that makes the best pie crust.
The best
of anything you can use.
Yeah.
Anything you can use is bear fat.
And there's lots of things you can do when you have to.
Tell me now. Most of the guys that I've talked to, they've had an interesting bear story. I got to tell you this one. I'll tell you this one.
Lots of bear stories, but they weren't very interesting. It was just a question. Always with me, it was a question of survival. It was a question of shoot to eat and hunt to fish or trap or whatever you done. It was to get enough to keep the pot boiling, because in the hungry 30s, it was hungry. And remember, we went into the hungry 30s with nothing.
Yeah, you'd been
no home. We lost our home. We lost all our clothes. We didn't even have a pair of shoes. Nothing. And you stop and think about that. No money, no home, no pots or no pans or no chairs, tables or.
You weren't around when the fire burned, huh?
No.
You couldn't save a thing.
No, not a thing. I did save a shotgun and a rifle because I had them with me.
Yeah.
When we were haying at another place further up the valley.
Yeah, that must be.
And that's tough. You know, you don't even have a pair of mitts for the winter. You don't have anything. Eh?
Did the neighbors pitch in as much as they could, or did anybody try?
No, not in those days because the neighbors didn't have anything to pitch in.
Yeah,
They had nothing to pitch. They were all in the same boat pretty well.
Yeah, you have your youth and your young manhood happened to be at the worst
About the worst time it could because
yeah.
you know. And
any pleasure that you might have, travel or things like kids do nowadays was out of the question.
Never even unheard of.
Yeah.
You worked like when Archibald's had the mill there. I worked for them for in the summertime, $2 a day in the mill and 10 hours a day, always 10 hours. That would be 20 cents an hour. But when you worked on the farm, like for Harrison and the different farmers around, you only got $1 a day for 10 hours a day.
Gosh.
But you got your lunch deal, you know.
But you could buy a lunch for a dime or a nickel, couldn't you? Anyway?
Oh, yeah. Hamburger was 15 cents a pound in the store.
Yeah.
2 pounds for a quarter.
Yeah.
And eggs were 2 bits a dozen if you bought them. We always had chickens and had your own eggs. And you had a cow. You had your own milk and butter. You had your own milk and butter and eggs and lots of meat and lots of fish. And of course, coming from back east, I got a net sent up from Vancouver one time. I might as well tell you this because it doesn't matter now anyway.
Well, everybody that lived during those times, I don't think anybody's going to pinch you now for it. Yeah.
Anyhow, I got this net from Vancouver. Great big chunk of net somebody sent up, salmon net for me, see? And it was more than I needed, so I cut it in half and I made a small net that I could handle in the lakes pretty handy, you see. And up there at, what do they call it now? Summit Lake. You know what we call it? We used to call it Cribbin Lake.
Yeah, on the high point there, on the way north to Merritt.
Yeah.
Right beside the highway.
Right beside,
right where the people, you have to watch out when you're casting, you don't have a car.
Okay. Well, you didn't have to worry about cars in them days. It'd only be two cars a week maybe would go by in those days.
I've been standing there fly fishing and come close. Car come along, it's quiet,
Oh, yeah. But in those days, now that lake is full of little trout. But and when I was a kid, they were great big. I've got them 10, 12 pounders out of there.
Oh, yeah.
Huge big things. But you couldn't get them to bite no matter. Didn't matter what you done. We tried everything. Even took baby mice up there. Tried that. Fish and worms. No way.
Mice.
So what we used to do, this pal of mine, Don Archibald, he was a real good shot, but he couldn't swim worth a hoot. So I could swim pretty good when I was a kid. So we'd take bread up there, see?
Oh, yeah.
22.
Yeah, and you'd lure them.
We'd throw the bread in the water, and then when they'd come up to get the bread, they would never bite it. They'd just come up, you think they were going to grab it, and then they'd just turn away. They were so fat and so full, they wouldn't eat.
They're just looking at it.
But in the meantime, old Don would bang with the 22, see?
Yeah.
And just as he pulled the trigger, I died, because if that fish gave more than about 2 flips, I couldn't get him. You know, he had to shoot him in the head and put him there and knock him out before I could get him. But that's how we used to get him.
Yeah.
Well, then I thought, he's sitting up in the log there, bare naked,
like a big jaybird.
If somebody would come along, walking or something, or on a horse, you see, and Indians would go by.
Yeah.
So I thought, there's got to be a better way than this. So I got this net up. I got this net up from Vancouver.
Yeah.
And, there's kind of a narrows in the lake, kind of like an hourglass shape. I used to put the net across the narrows. Nothing to it. And, with a little bit of maneuvering, you can set a net so nobody sees it. If you put your lead lines heavier than your float lines, you can drop it and sink it down 6 or 8 feet under the water. And anyway, we were getting fish to beat the band, and we'd salt it down for the winter. See, good stuff. And you get these nice big trout, and fill them out, salt them down these chunks, and we were doing fine. So Wes Young, I guess you know him, and you've heard of him. At one time, he was the head of the Fish and Game Club when it started up here at that time. So him and Mother, of course, he come from New Brunswick and we come from Nova Scotia. We had a little bit in common always. He always used to stop in and have a cup of tea with us, you see. And this time he came in there, boy, was he mad. He said, you know, some so-and-so has been fishing up in the lake there with a net. He says, and I snarled up on the net with my fishing gear. Of course, I didn't say anything, but I thought, son of a gun. He had my net in the back of his car.
Oh,
took it down,
yeah.
for evidence. I thought, oh, brother. So anyway, I never said a dang word, but when he got out of the house to go back to get in his car, I looked down and I had the other half of the net all over the strawberries down there to keep the birds off. I guess if he tumbled, he never said anything. But that was the end of my net. So, why? But they were great big trout, and I don't know how or why they got so big. And now they put them in there, and there's hundreds and hundreds of little ones, but they never get any size. You never get a trout over there. Well, I caught one about 14 inches, and I thought that was a monster.
Yeah. Well, did they stock them in those days, didn't you? When you were?
Oh yeah.
That's how they couldn't reproduce in there. But they just didn't throw as many in. That's all they did.
Well, I guess that's what it was.
Because the food was spread around.
What we call the cribbing lake. You can still see some of the cribbing there, you know, where the road is built out onto it. You know what cribbing is. Well, we called it cribbing lake in those days. And you could stand and walk along the cribbing, and you could see them in there. Great big trouts.
Just swimming slowly by. Yeah. The first thing, when I first came into this country, I went to the next one, Gladstone.
Down the hole.
And I drove up on this point on the north west side there, where the road comes kind of scrabbles along the hillside there, and there's a point. And I looked down over the hill. There was a trout swimming by. I said, "This is my country. I've come to the right place."
That's a fish.
Yeah. I met the old man there. What was his name? He had that beautiful little boat that he rowed around. He was an old Englishman, I think. And I met him.
Oh, not old Bob.
Yeah, Taylor.
Yeah,
I met old Bob Taylor that day.
Yeah, he was fished there quite a bit.
Yeah, beautiful little rowboat.
Yeah,
remember that little boat?
I remember that. Yeah.
And it rode so nice, and he was trolling around out there with his fly.
Fish all the time.
Yeah.
Another thing too, you know, before they poisoned the lakes up there, that Round Lake had great big fish in it. Oh, it had trout in there, 8 and 10 pounders.
Yeah.
But nobody ever fished them. For some reason, I never even had a boat, and I didn't have any fishing gear either.
Yeah.
Remember, I had nothing, eh?
Yeah.
But from where Round Lake is to Dry Lake, there's still a fence all along the road down there. Well, I built that fence, about 1939 or 40, I guess.
That barbed wire fence.
Yeah. The first one, I guess it's been replaced by the government and that now, but that was really a drift fence put in there by the Cattlemen's Association.
And you built it for them?
And I built it for them.
Yeah. Took the contract.
I took the contract. I got $40 out of that fence.
How long is it?
Well,
2 miles?
No, I don't know. I don't think it's that long. It seems that long. Okay. But I had to cut all the posts and dig all the holes by hand and string all the wire and put a stay between all the posts. Anyway, I was living in an old cabin there that big fancy house is right at the end of Round Lake?
Yeah.
Well, there was a cabin right about where that house is in the brush there.
Yeah.
You could never see it before. And I stayed in that old cabin.
Just you and the pack rats?
Me and the pack rats. and a few mice. And I didn't have any stove or nothing.
Yeah.
But there had been a fire down. So people had lived on that place called Hazelton's, and they were burnt out. And their house was down about where the bridge is, where the creek crosses there. This side.
I think so.
Anyhow, this old cook stove was there, burnt.
Burnt out, yeah.
Cabin burnt down, see?
Oh, and there it was, sitting where the old cabin was.
Yeah, so I hauled this thing up.
Piece by piece?
No, just the main body of the stove. It was pretty well gutted out.
All the tinware was rusted off.
But what I done, I turned it upside down in the cabin, and it had a skirt on it, see, and I used this skirt and put some dirt in it, and I used it for a fireplace, and I had I had an open fire in this old cabin.
How'd you get rid of the smoke?
You gotta go through. Well, you know, it was just
they're pretty.
No windows or nothing. It
Yeah.
was just a shack. It was summertime, springtime.
Oh, okay.
But anyhow, I built a little bunk in there, and I used to go home every second night and get some more grub and bring
A
it
square
down.
meal.
Yeah, and get a good meal and bring it down. And mostly it was stew and stuff like that I could just warm up on the fire.
Mhm.
Anyway, I lived in this shack for maybe a week or 10 days while I was building this fence.
Mhm.
And in the evenings, I had to go over to the creek, and you know these big trout would go down the creek.
Yeah, they still do.
They still do.
Yeah.
But they were big ones.
Yeah.
Well, I had no way of catching them, except I had a hunting knife. You always had a hunting knife.
Carry that on your belt.
So I strapped my hunting knife onto a stick with a shoelace, and I used to spear them. See, down. You see,
Yeah.
you had to pin them into the rocks.
Yeah, right, because you had no barb on your knife.
Otherwise, you'd lose them. And
Yeah.
you just had to hold them there till you.
Isn't that a little rough on the knife?
Yeah, I used to kind of dull the knife.
How about the point on the rocks?
It was worth it to get the fish, though.
Yeah.
So I'd get some of these big fish speared, and then I'd take them up to Mother, and she'd cook them and fry them up. And of course, we'd have a big feed, and what was left over, we'd salt them because everything was salted in those days. Salt was cheap and easy to do, and we were used to salt and stuff because we salt fish back east.
Did you have crocks that you put salt
Old
in?
crocks, and you could get wooden pails from the store that used to have mincemeat. Used to come in wooden buckets.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So you know
with a lid on it.
Yeah, with a lid on, and they're wooden. You could clean them out. They made dandy little pails to salt fish in and meat and stuff.
I heard a story of it. What was it? You put your stuff in there, good and hot, and then you put a layer of tallow on the top or something, and it more or less like a sealer, and it'd act like a sealer on the top there.
Well, I don't know about that. The only thing I can remember in that way was the Italian people used to make sausages, and they'd put them in a crock and pour hot fat on them. They'd melt down the fat and pour it all over the sausages.
Yeah, so they were embedded.
They were embalmed right in sausages.
Yeah.
In the fat.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you dug them out and you had your fat back.
Yeah.
And you had your sausages.
Yeah.
And that was one method of keeping them. But we didn't do that because we had no way of making sausages. But I'll tell you what we used to do. If I'd get a real fat deer, I used to always cut all those flank off of them like you would on a porker to make bacon. And we used to make bacon of a sort out of venison. If you had a nice fat
side bacon there.
Side bacon.
Yeah.
And it worked good. You could buy that stuff, seasoning, salt
smoky
stuff.
Smoky flavored stuff.
Roll, put on, worked good. And it was good. You'd hardly know the difference from bacon.
Yeah.
It was good. Really good. And then, of course, we salted a lot down and made hams and stuff.
Did you ever dry meat?
Jerky?
Yep. You smoked it and made jerky? That's one of my favorites, boy.
Well, we didn't. We used to just salt it and then dry it. Never bothered smoking it.
Well,
but you could smoke it too, but we didn't bother smoking it.
It was just an something extra.
Chore to do.
Yeah. You were just preserving. You weren't going too much for flavor. You just wanted to save it.
Yep. We used to shoot quite a few deer every year, you know. Once they got good. They're no good till about August, you know, before they start to get fit teeth. They're not fit teeth now. They're all full of wood ticks and skinny and having their young and shedding their old hair and all that. Right. You never shoot them in the spring. You're no good. But then once they started to get in good shape, you know, and then you'd start for the winter again.
How many would you use? One a month? One every 2 weeks?
One winter I shot 16, I remember.
Yeah.
But then that wasn't just for us, because I used to keep old Larry McKenzie in meat, and Harrison most of the time he couldn't hit a deer. He was locked in the barn with me. So I used to get him a deer or two every year, and then Archibalds, they were real good shots, but they were always so busy working and logging, and half the time they didn't have time to hunt. So
Didn't they drag their rifle along with them when they were logging?
well, they carry it in the car,
Yeah, if there was one there, they'd get one.
handy.
Yeah.
But I'd hunt and get them a deer or two once in a while, and then they'd give me a can of gas or something like that. Or
Hey, do you know anything about that colony up there on Darcy Mountain? There was a little settlement in there, or a little.
Oh yeah.
There was a nice little 2-story house in there. You know what I mean? Sort of a story and a half.
Yeah. Well, there's different buildings up there.
Yeah. But they tell me that was a deer camp. The guys were hunting up there for deer and shipping them to Vancouver.
Oh, that's lately. That's recently.
Yeah, not too long ago.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Oh, I know what you mean. I've been in that camp. I've seen it and went in there to see what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I figured out what it was. But,
was that an illegal thing or illegal?
Oh, certainly it was illegal.
Huh.
There's our official poachers in Princeton. They were up there, and they'd shoot a deer or two or 3 or 4 or whatever, and it just kind of up looking out over a field.
Mm-hmm. There's a little lake back there, not too far. Yeah,
and that's a good spot for
Duck
deer.
Lake. Yeah.
Yeah, I logged off of Darcy Mountain for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, yeah.
I lived up there from 38 to about close into 41 or 2 along.
That's nice. That's a nice area up there.